Ooh, so it's been a long, long day. And now it's time to curl up and listen to some great true ghost stories told by you, my subscribers. Well, hello, my spooky friends and wonderful wild weirdos. How are you doing? I have had it with work today, and I really just want to tell some stories. You know, get the day off of me and just relax. Get a little bit spooky. Isn't that fun? Well, I mean, I think it's fun. And you must think it's fun since you're here. I know you've got some weirdo inside of you somewhere. Let's bring it out. Okay, so these stories have been sent to me through emails by my subscribers. So let's dive right in. This first one was sent to me by W. Williamson. Okay, that's just the way they want to be known. And it's called Virginia. Linda called me Monday, October 5th, and told me that Virginia had fallen and broken her ribs and was in the hospital. She was by herself when she fell, as she is most of the time, even at 93 years old. You go, girl. Because Linda had to work the next day, I told her that I would go sit with Virginia. The next morning, I went to the hospital, and as I was coming around the corner going to Virginia's room, a very tall, handsome young man stopped me. He was standing by a cart of laundry. I assumed he was an orderly, but I did not know him and had never seen him in my life. He pointed down the hall and said, "Room 435, right down there. You were here last night, weren't you?" He also knew my name. Okay, he knew your name. That is a little odd. Room 435 was Virginia's room, but the hall is very long, and I could have been anybody going anywhere. And no, I was not there the night before. I just thanked him and went on. I thought it was very odd at the time. It's like I had a sign around my neck with room 435, I'm lost. I tell you something, sometimes I need a sign. I'm lost. Please, someone return me to somewhere else. Maybe somewhere with a beach. How about that? I stayed the day until Linda came in. I was going to leave earlier as soon as I found out how close she was to the hospital, but Virginia didn't want me to go. She was afraid something would happen if I left her, and she would be by herself, so I stayed. When Linda came in, I gave her an update and left. As I started around the same corner, in the exact same place, the young man appeared again. He smiled and said, "Bye, girl. I'll see you later." I smiled back at him and told him goodbye. I have no idea who he was, and I have never seen him before in my life, nor have I seen him since. Wow. So you were there all day, so I don't know if he worked a 12-hour shift. I mean, I'm assuming that this person is real at first. Like, I don't know. But how did he know your name? I mean, and he knew exactly where you were going. You weren't there the night before, but he remembered seeing you the night before. So if he saw you the night before, what was he doing there in the morning? Like, does this man ever go home? Or is he, maybe, an angel? Watching out? Because Virginia was really scared to be by herself, that something would happen. So was it a ghost? Watching over people? I mean, I guess you don't sleep a whole lot when you're a ghost. I mean, I don't know. Like, I am not the expert on the afterlife, okay? But I'm assuming that no one has ever seen a ghost taking a nap, right? If you have, please let me know in the comments. But I've never heard a story like that. So they're just like up all the time. And, what are you going to do but stand there? I don't know. Did it feel more like a spirit, like a ghost spirit? Did it feel like a friendly angel? Ooh, excuse me. Sorry, I've got the hiccups. Okay, but let's go on. If he was a first shift worker, how would he have known who was in her room the night before? If I had left that day when I started to, would I have met him in the hall at all? Was there another reason I was detained? What would have happened if I had told Virginia that Linda was almost there and I had left anyway? That is a very good question. Could me or Virginia have possibly been in a dangerous situation and this slight moment in time prevented it? I am completely dumbfounded by this experience. I think he was an angel sending me to her. Okay, so that answered all my questions. I think it was an angel too. Have you all ever been detained by just a few seconds or a minute or something and then like narrowly missed a bad accident or something else that was, going on? I mean, I have. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, I've gotten really irritated because I just can't seem to get out of the house on time, like, going to work. And it's like you're in slow motion. And then at the last minute, you can't find the keys that you just had in your hand. And it makes you like 5, 10 minutes late. Has that ever happened to you? It has me. And then as you're going down the road and you're like, I'm going to be late. And then there is an accident or something in front of you, and that could have been you. I've literally thought so many times, if I had been on time, that could have been me. So I have to wonder too. And I agree. I think it's an angel. Okay, our next story is by Holly Hunt. I've worked at some notoriously haunted facilities in Georgia as an RN. I don't have ghostly encounters myself, at least not since I was a small child, but some coworkers and patients I worked with had some interesting stories to tell. Ghosts don't scare me ever, but mostly just a curiosity for me. See, I'm the same way. They don't scare me, but it is curious. I worked in a hospital across from a Civil War battlefield that was famous for its hauntings. The hospital I worked at, my first job, had a new part attached to the old hospital that had been there since the Civil War. It had been updated, of course, and built onto extensively, and it was the old part where the stories took place. I preferred the night shift as it wasn't so hectic and it paid extra to work during those night hours. One night when we were sitting around, the ghost stories come out. Oh, yeah, as they do at 3 a.m. when you have nothing else to do. Her name was Nora, they said, and she crashed her car on the way home after working a double. Oh no. She was particularly dedicated and she couldn't stop caring for patients even after her passing, it seemed. The first experience of Nora was told by the maintenance man who walked into work one morning and spoke to her in the hallway. When he heard she had passed the day before, he was so freaked out he never spoke of it again. Yeah, and for those of you that say nurses don't tell stories or admit to stories like this is some of the reason because sometimes you are just really freaked out. And you just don't want to talk about it anymore, what you saw or whatever happened. Now, me, I don't care. I'll tell you anything, and I don't care if you believe me or not. I mean, clearly, here I am. Oh, Scully, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Everybody say hi to Scully. I'm sorry. Oh, we're gonna fight later. We're gonna fight. I'm just tired, and I forgot he was back there until he started with his nonsense. Okay. But yeah, I mean, clearly, I don't care. I'm telling ghost stories on YouTube, so there you go. Some years after this, on a particularly busy night, they ran out of blankets. Yes, this was a problem during my time there, even still. Anyway, as the story goes, the patient called down to ask for an extra blanket, and the busy nurse explained that they were out, but she would see what she could do. In addition to her other tasks, she had to call other units in search of a blanket. It took way too long, so she went to the patient's room to apologize and let them know they were still on it. The guy says, "Oh, never mind, that other nurse already brought me one." The nurse was confused. What nurse? And where did she get that blanket? Was she hiding a stash? She thought to herself. She asked the guy if he knew which nurse it was. maybe she could let her in on her private stash. He described a middle aged, red-headed woman wearing a white uniform. No one had dressed like that for years, and yes, Nora was a redhead. I never saw Nora myself, but one of my patients did. I don't know if this woman ever heard the stories of Nora prior to her arrival and maybe just dreamed it due to stories she heard, but she wasn't convinced she had not. She was going to surgery the next day, and her family was all in the room, bawling and stressing over her. I was a bit ticked off at them and wished they would just go home as they weren't helping her anxiety. Yes, please no. Don't do that to your family. Anyway, my next shift, I was anxious to see if all had gone well for her. It had, thankfully, and she couldn't wait to tell me about it. She said during the night a nurse came in and told her she need not worry. She'd get through just fine, and for some reason she knew she was telling her the truth. She said there was something reassuring and comforting about her. She had been wide awake, unable to sleep that night, so definitely didn't dream her up. I asked her for a description, and she said she wore a white uniform, like the old days, and was a redhead. Gave me chills. Not fear, just chills. Well, kudos to you, Nora, for staying around and staying on the job. And I feel like it is so very sad that she was, passed away in a car crash, leaving after a double shift. I mean, can you imagine? But I guess she just wasn't done with her career, and she wants to give comfort and, peace to those, and maybe even some, helpfulness to the patients that are there. And I want to tell you something, at least now, Nora, you don't have sore feet and legs, and you don't have to pee and are chronically hungry because you don't have time for lunch. That is the good part about being a ghost nurse, right? You don't have to deal with all this other stuff that drives you nuts. That's just my opinion. You go, Nora. This next story isn't necessarily a ghost story, but I wanted to include it because I think it is very common for things like this to happen in healthcare, and this is the very best way to handle it. This is submitted by Kitty Witty. I love that name. Here's my story. My favorite creepy story isn't exactly a ghost story. I was working as a hospice nurse and had this patient with dementia dying of something else. She was the sweetest, happy, most lovable person, and I loved visiting her. One day she started talking about seeing her long dead mother, that they were going on a train trip soon. These are symptoms of impending death, seeing dead loved ones, and talking about going somewhere. So I knew my lady was getting ready to go. In the week before she died, she was so excited about this train trip and that there was going to be this big party when she got there. Other dying patients have told me about the big party you get when you die. Really? Now that's new to me. She turned to me and invited me to her party. I stuttered, then said, I can't go yet. I have things I have to do first. But save me a seat, 'cause I want to hear all about your party. She said she would. Someday I'm holding her to that promise. Yeah, you know when someone is going to pass and in their, whatever state that they're in, especially with dementia, they may not always be aware that what they're saying and feeling and thinking is not quite in the normal scope. I think she absolutely is going on a train trip and they're going to have a big party. And I think that was the very best response. I've got things to do right now, but save me a seat because I want to hear all about it. And so do I. Even if you're not ready to get on that train now, somebody save me a seat. And that better be the glory train, not like the express bus to hell, okay? I'm just saying. All right, this is a great story submitted by Just Jeff. Now hold on to your hats because this one gets really crazy, all right? I lived somewhere in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I lived in a duplex with my roommate who had worked the overnight shift, so we only hung out on the weekends. Basically, I had a nice house all to myself. This happened early February of 2002. At around 7:30 a.m., I'm lying in bed when my doorbell starts going off nonstop. I get out of bed, throw on some pants, and answer the door. It's the neighbor's maybe 10-year-old son. Angrily, I ask him what he wanted. He stares at me for a second, then he says, "I think my dad is dead." For the sake of anonymity, I'll call the kid's dad Joe, not his real name. I looked at the kid and was like, "What?" And the kid replies, "I think my dad is dead." I run over next door and open up the garage, which is completely full of thick carbon monoxide from the vehicle exhaust. I opened the door and yelled out, "Joe!" No response. I reach across him and turn off the ignition and tell the kid to stay outside, and I ran next door to call the police. Within minutes, half the block is full of police cars and an ambulance to transport Joe's body away. I then get a hold of Joe's address book and called a nearby relative to inform them and to see if they could come get his son who would be staying at my house. All of this was traumatic for me and more so for the child, and within a week, Joe was laid to rest, and for me, life went on. I was 25 at the time, and although this was my first experience with death, it was pretty tough. I was saddened by Joe's passing, but I still went to work every day and did my normal things. Fast forward to around 2 weeks later, I worked the evening shift, so I got off of work every night at 11 p.m. I would drive home, sometimes stopping for a bite to eat, and maybe a six-pack of beer. Now, at this time in my life, I was a lightweight when it came to drinking beer, let alone anything harder than beer, such as whiskey. In fact, if I got 3 beers down, I was so buzzed that I'd often go to sleep very soon after having my third beer. I would sometimes party with my friends, but most of the time I would just sip on the beer. Hey, Jeff, I'm a lightweight too. I get it. So around 2 weeks later, I get off of work at 11 p.m. and head home. Along the way, I stopped at Brahms and bought their chicken strips with gravy. Oh my gosh, that sounds good. Then I went to the gas station next door and bought a six-pack of beer. Then I drove home. I walked in the front door, kicking the door shut behind me as I walked into the living room and set my food and beer down on the coffee table. I turned on the TV and sat down to relax until sleep. I drank 1 beer before starting in on the food. I remember this clearly. I had just grabbed my second beer and was getting ready to twist off the metal cap when I got a knock at my front door. I looked at the time, and it was right around midnight. I thought it was strange for someone to be coming over so late, but whatever. I got up and opened the front door, and there was Joe standing there, clearly deceased. Okay, so you've only had 1 beer, a little bit of chicken, your dead neighbor, who is clearly deceased, is knocking at your door. That is horrifying. So let's see what happened. I woke up kicking and screaming, throwing my covers off of me. What a nightmare. Except I don't remember anything after opening the front door and seeing Joe standing there, and I'm still wearing my dirty work clothes and my shoes are still on. I lay there for a few minutes, trying to comprehend what was going on. A horrible nightmare? Or what? I got out of bed and went to the living room. The front door was shut, but by this time my roommate was already home and in his own room asleep. On the coffee table was an empty beer bottle and a beer bottle with a cap still on, separated from the other 4 beers still in the six-pack carton, and barely eaten food still opened up. Whatever. I got on with my day and soon went to work. Now, I'm just going to tell you, at this point, I don't know if I could just carry on. I'd be like, what the heck? But, I can see you trying to get back to normal. All right. 2 or 3 days later, I got home around 11:30 p.m. and I sat down on the couch to watch some television. I also clearly remember opening up the last beers from the six-pack I had bought a couple of days before. Like I said, 2 was my limit. 3 beers and I was drunk. Around midnight, I heard a knock at the door and I questioned why someone is coming over so late. Without a thought in my mind, I get up to open the door and there stands Joe, once again. I woke up around 7 a.m., kicking and screaming in my bed. No recollection of anything after I opened the front door the night before. Every time I woke up kicking and screaming after seeing my deceased neighbor at the door, it was always the next morning around 7 to 8 a.m. I never once had any knowledge or memory of anything that happened after I would open the front door. One minute I would be sitting on the couch watching TV, get up to answer the knock at the front door, and the next thing I would know is I'm freaking out in my bed with the morning sun shining through my window. The same series of events began to happen almost every night. I began buying more and more beer until I was soon drinking 12, then moving on to a 24 pack, sitting outside my house guzzling beer after beer until I could hardly walk inside my own house. It did not matter what time it was, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., I would stagger inside to go pass out in my bed, shut the front door behind me only to hear a knock shortly after, and as if in a trance, I would not question my insanity. I would simply open the front door to see who was knocking so late, only to see Joe standing there more and more decomposed. Then wake up screaming in my bed. I never once had any knowledge or memory of anything that happened after I would open the front door. One minute, I'd be sitting on the couch watching TV, get up to answer the knock on the front door, and the next thing I would know, I'm freaking out in my bed with the sun shining through my window. Barely a month after this started, I told my roommate that I was moving out. Yeah, not to be funny here, but in all sincerity, if I kept coming home at night and my dead neighbor kept coming over knocking at my door and I'd wake up, like, I would move too. That is horrifying. Definitely not the kind of neighbor that you want to have. I mean, God, isn't that more like Beetlejuice? I literally moved to the cheapest high crime area in Tulsa just to get away. If anyone knows where 7th and Lewis is, that's where I moved to. Instantly, I got some much needed sleep. No more knocking on my door, no more Joe. The problem was I had become a drunk. Once alcohol gets a hold of you, it can be hard to quit, especially after something like that. Before that experience and after that experience, I never suffered from anything like that. No mental illness in my family, no schizophrenia or bipolar disorders, and yes, even back then, I checked the carbon monoxide alarm. I checked for gas leaks. I checked for everything that I could think of because I was living in hell every night and I wanted to know if it was me or something else. Right, because at this point, you have to question your own sanity, right? I mean, come on. Who does this happen to? That's what I would do, Jeff. I would have said, okay, I think I'm cracking up. I need to go see somebody. Every now and then, after I moved out, my ex roommate would come over to hang out, or I would go by his place, but never for the night. And the darndest thing happened after I moved out. Him and his best friend told me that after I moved out, both of them and others who stayed over would see a shadow. Sorry, Sachi. They would see a shadow leave my old room and go down the hall. I still never told him nor anyone else this story because I had too much pride. I didn't want anyone to make fun of me or to think I was crazy. Months after I moved out, I even tried going to therapy, but found that I could not talk about this because I was so scared of being locked up in a mental institution. I finally told a great friend of mine this a couple of months ago, and she was like, Joe was trying to tell you something important. I replied, then he could have written something on a note or on the steam in my bathroom mirror or a phone call from the dead, not showing up at my front door, clearly decomposing. Now, it's not funny, but that is exactly something I would say. I've had a few other paranormal things happen to me, but these things were so benign. The kind of things that make you wonder if you were under stress or tired or something. Things that honestly can be written off as so many other things. But as real and as vivid as that experience was in 2002, I'll never understand why it happened nor what it was. Okay, I have had several emails back and forth with Just Jeff, and I just want you to know, because I wanted to know, are you okay now? Like, all the things that this brought on, all the trauma and the habits and stuff. He said he is doing fine now. And I thank you so much for sharing this story. Yeah, like, don't come over here and just you stand at my door decomposing, okay? If you've got a message, we found there are other ways to do this. There are ghost calls. There are other things. Yeah, right on my wall, right on the steam in the shower. Do not stand at the door dead, okay? Um, yeah, it does seem to me like one of two things. I mean, you could say it's a ghost that of your neighbor that, kept coming to you, or was it a demonic presence that was a doppelganger, maybe trying to torment you, or, lay some kind of guilt trip on you because, you feel like maybe you should have done more. I don't think you could have done more. You cannot stop somebody from doing what they want to do. And it seems like Joe had his own problems. But what do you all think? Just FYI, Just Jeff sent me another story as well. It is so super cool. Not as dark as this one, but it's a lot of fun. And I will be sharing that soon. All right. In the meantime, if you like true ghost stories or you have true ghost stories, hit the like button, send me an email, comment below. I want to hear your stories and I will put them on here. All right. I hope you have a great rest of the week. And I am going to try to get some rest if Scully will let me, and Sachi, who you probably see her in the corner here. We'll see what's going to happen. But in the meantime, y'all, just stay spooky, okay? Bye-bye.